Hello crafty friends, it's Alicia of the Call Me Crafty YouTube channel, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing another alternative using the July 2020 paper pumpkin kit. Today I will be turning one of Stampin' Up's ideas into a clear card. I hope you'll stick around and see how I'm going to make it. Thank you so much for stopping by today. If this is your first time to my channel, I hope that by the end of this video, you'll be inspired to click on that subscribe button below and maybe even tap on that bell for notifications. If you're already a subscriber and regular viewer, welcome back. I'm so glad that you're here again. Over the past couple of days, I have shared with you some alternatives already using this kit. The first video showed you how I made these two slimline cards, and then yesterday's video showed how I made this pocket card using the bag from the kit. I will have both of these videos linked below if you want to check them out. For today's card, I will be recreating the mason jar postcard from the kit, but I will be using a clear card base instead of just that plain postcard. From the kit, I will be using the vellum mason jar, a few of the fireflies. I will be stamping my sentiment on this shape tag, and my background card is different than what they show here in the instructions. It's the one that has kind of like a mint green to a dark blue. I'll be using that instead. For my stamps, I chose the starburst, the little firefly, and the sentiment says, "You light up my life." And I almost forgot that Stampin' Spot again. I will be using the one that came with the kit, which is Blackberry Bliss, for my sentiment. The items not from the kit, I got out my Versamark ink and detail white embossing powder. I got out a top fold clear card base and a piece of white cardstock to cut down for the inner card. Now, before I move on with the process, I do get a lot of questions on my clear card bases, and I recently did a Q&A video all about it, so I will have that video linked in the description box below, and I'll try to remember to pop it up at the end as an end card. If I do leave you with any other questions, make sure to leave those in the comments section below. Let's get crafty! As with most of my clear cards, I usually like to make a small inner card for the inside where I can hide my personal message to the recipient. This card is no different. I'm going to make a card that goes inside that ends up folding to 3 1/4 by 4 1/2. So this strip of white cardstock I cut to 3 1/4 inches wide by 9 inches tall. Then I just fold it in half so I have that little card to go on the inside. Next, I cut down the postcard from the kit to fit on the front of that inner card. Because there are small rounded corners on this, I trimmed those off first. I took 1/8 of an inch off each side, and then because there was just a little bit of that light blue or that mint green, for the height of this card, which again I want to be 4 1/2, I took it all off the darker side, just so I didn't cut off all that pretty lighter blue. Once that was cut to the 4 1/2 inches tall, I then cut it to 3 1/4 inches wide. I decided to go ahead and adhere my pattern piece to the front of my inner card, and I will tell you now that if I had to do this over, I probably would have waited until after I stamped it. I noticed that the heat of setting the embossing powder kind of warped that adhesive a little bit. It's not really noticeable, but I think maybe for next time I might change that. Before I can put that card on the inside of my clear card base, I do need to do the stamping. But before I can do the stamping, I need to kind of figure out where the stamping needs to go. So I temporarily place that inner card on the inside of my clear card, and I just use a couple pieces of Scotch Blue removable tape. Then I place my mason jar on the front where I thought I might like it, and I tried to arrange the fireflies as well where I thought they looked good on the card. Once I had those in a good place, I brought in a pencil and I carefully tried to lift everything up and make a mark on the inner card where the little firefly was. Later when I stamp, you'll notice that I try to center the stamp where I have made each of those pencil marks. Now I can go ahead and use the starburst stamp on the inner card. I inked it up with my Versamark ink, and then I did my best to center it on that first pencil mark. I had forgotten to use my embossing buddy before I did this one, but I did make sure to get those out for the rest, just so the embossing powder doesn't stick to where I don't want it to. While I'm stamping this, I just wanted to give you a heads up. I've had a few subscribers ask me recently if I'm a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator because they're interested in purchasing the kit. I am not a demonstrator because I want to be able to use all kinds of products here on my YouTube channel, but if you live in the United States and you don't already have a demonstrator, I would love it if you would consider who I buy from. I purchase my subscription from Chelsea Christensen here on YouTube, and each month I get a fun little extra card kit to use with the paper pumpkin. Her information is linked in the description box below if you want to go check it out. Once I had all of my starburst stamped, I pulled out my tidy tray and I dumped almost the entire container of white embossing powder over the card front. The great thing is I just tap it off into the tray and then I can save it for later. Now I did have a little bit of powder from where I did not use my embossing buddy, so I wiped that off just with my fingers before I brought in my heat tool to heat set the powder. I did start by heating it from the back. Sometimes this just helps with the warping. And then when that was warm, I brought my heat tool to the front and finished the powder until it turned white. And it was after this that I kind of noticed the bottom of it was a little bit curled. Like I mentioned earlier, I probably should have not put this onto the card base before I did the stamping. But live and learn, right? Once I had all of those heat set, I brought in one of my most underestimated tools, my white eraser, and I just gently went into the center of each starburst and erased that pencil mark that I had made before. While I still had out my stamping mat, I went ahead and did the rest of the stamping. The first thing I did was inked up my sentiment stamp and then stamped that centered onto the tag that came with the kit. The reason that I like to stamp on this black foam pad is when you have stamps that are like clear stamps where they don't have that foam cushioning underneath them, this gives that little extra cushion and helps you get nice clear images. I wanted to stamp a few of the fireflies on the front of that inner card. To make sure I had a good placement, I brought back in my mason jar and just kind of held that where I thought it might go on the final card. Once that was in place, I brought in my firefly stamp and the Blackberry Bliss ink spot. I inked up my firefly, moved the mason jar over, and stamped it. I ended up stamping 3 of these fireflies on the front of the inner card. Now that all of the pieces are ready, it's time to start putting the card together. The first thing I do is put adhesive on the back of my inner card and then place that centered on the inside of my clear card base. I do get asked a lot if I try to hide the adhesive on the back of this in any way, and I really don't. I don't worry that my recipient's gonna look at the back and be like, oh yuck, adhesive. But if you wanted to do that, you could always put another border around that inner card and just adhere it to the back of that clear card. Now there is some adhesive that I do try to hide, and that is anything that will be seen through the front of the vellum mason jar. I want to make sure that my glue dots that I'm going to use are going to be hidden by the fireflies. So the first thing I need to do is get my fireflies attached to my mason jar. I put 1 glue dot on the back of each firefly and then place that onto the vellum piece. Now these glue dots, you'll notice they are a lot larger than the ones that came with the kit. I decided to save those since I had these left over and I didn't really need the mini glue dots for the fireflies. I pulled off the release paper and then placed those down on the mason jar. Once the fireflies were in place, I then knew where I could place my adhesive on the back of my mason jar. I used 2 glue dots on the back of each firefly just to add a little extra adhesive there, and then pulled the release paper and adhered that to the front of my clear card. Next, I pulled out the sentiment tag and I just used my regular adhesive on the back of this to adhere it to the card front. I love my Scotch ATG. I know it looks kind of big and bulky, but I'm used to it now and I love the price of the adhesive compared to little tape runners. To finish off the card, I pulled out the adhesive stars that came with the kit, and I placed 3 in a triangle shape on the card. The first one actually went on the front of the inner card, and then the last 2 went onto the vellum mason jar. One of the great things about clear cards is you can get a lot of layering without adding bulk, just because the front and the inside are seen at the same time, but they're in different layers. And here's a close-up look at the finished card. I hope you enjoyed getting to see how I made my clear card today. If you did, as always, I appreciate a thumbs up. Until my next video, I hope you're all having a crafty day. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch all the way to the end of the video. I hope now you'll consider clicking on one of the videos or playlists I have linked above, and if you're interested in any of the products or tools I used in today's video, I do have some links in the description box.